Mr. Durst is present with Mr. Chesnoff and Mr. DeGuerin. We've got Mr. Bailey and Mr. Henderson, Mr. Milius, and Mr. Lewin at the lectern. Mr. Lewin, you wanted to address an issue before the jurors are. We have two late jurors, but before the jurors arrive. Yes.
Very quickly,
and Mr.
Your Honor.
Lewis, thank you.
I just have a concern. I want to make sure, obviously, given what the defense said in both openings, laying out a very detailed story of what Bob Durst did, information only he has, and then saying that he is going to testify. Clearly, if he doesn't testify, we're going to have an issue of the jury being instructed that they have to disregard everything that the defense said in opening about that. But the second issue is that I want to make sure that the defense is not under any misimpression that by putting Mr. Durst up very quickly, very briefly, trying to limit what they ask him, that that's going to limit my cross-examination at all. I know the court is very familiar with all of the cases that are involved. This is more just putting on the record that they understand in advance that when Mr. Durst gets up there, I'm going to question him on everything, and it is quite extensive. So I just want to make sure those 2 points are up there, because if they decide not to have him testify, they've made a lot of promises to the jury. That's certainly up to them, but the issue they're going to have is all of the statements about what Mr. Durst did, how we found the body, etc. That's all struck, and all that would be left is the fact that he has admitted to writing the note, therefore the fact that obviously he found the body. So I just want to make sure they're aware of where we stand and that they're aware of what the authority is in California. They're not going to be able to limit my cross by simply putting up a very quick direct.
Clearly, if Mr. Durst didn't testify, you'd be able to.
Your Honor, I'm having trouble. I can't hear the court.
If Mr. Durst were not to testify and the evidence were different from what the defense expected it would show, you would be able to comment upon the discrepancy, point out what was stated in the opening that was not actually presented in evidence. You'd clearly be allowed to do that. There has been some evidence presented, sometimes through cross-examination, sometimes through direct, that does establish just a small part, but some parts of what was described. So that's there. I think the defense knows that. But you're right. I mean, it was an elaborate story that has not been presented entirely. It would be hard to do it without Mr. Durst not taking the witness stand. And I would be surprised if you did not cover every subject with your cross-examination. I'm sure you will. So the defense doesn't really need to comment. It's just Mr. Lewin describing his intent.
Other than to say we're shocked that Mr. Lewin is going to spend a lot of time.
I'm a man of surprises.
Yeah. I mean, there's a different. It would be very surprising if you did that sort of short cross-examination. That
what could you make if you bet $1 on me standing up and saying no questions? Would that pay $1 billion to 1, Your Honor?
Well, I mean, I mean, the implication being this is inherently unbelievable. It's been done. It's been done.
Nobody would take the bet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, no, we have no further comment.
Yeah, that's fine. That's for you to determine. Now, you're going to show all good things.
Yes.
I think that this, and I've commented repeatedly pre-trial, that I recognize that this is admissible for state of mind and for the adoptive admissions and et cetera, but I do think it's important that I give a limiting instruction. So I drafted one. Maybe you have one already. If not, I'll let you know what I would intend to do. I gave my microphone away to the soft-spoken witness. That's why I don't have.
Oh.
I'll get it back. But this is what I am proposing. If it will help you hear the court.
Which one?
That's mine.
This one.
You're going to
Yeah.
see blowback too.
Yeah.
So take note of this. This is what I would propose to tell the jurors. The people are presenting what obviously is a dramatic film called All Good Things, which is based upon incidents alleged in this case. This film is not being received for the truth of any of its assertions or depictions, but only to help you understand and evaluate subsequent statements by the defendant, Mr. Durst. It is very important that you not confuse any depictions, statements, reenactments, or allegations in this film as evidence, except as I have described. That is, its only permissible use is to help you understand and evaluate Mr. Durst's statements about the film. Only those statements made understandable by viewing the film are evidence in this case. Right?
Sounds perfect to me, Your Honor.
Fine with us, Your Honor.
Good. That's what I'll do.
Your Honor, can I ask a question?
Of
Mr.
course.
Lewin through the court? We know there were commentaries. Are they going to be played in conjunction with the viewing of the film, or what? How is that going to be?
So you are going to play the film and then play it again with the commentary, right?
So this is what we're going to do. We're going to play the film today. Next week, we're going to start going through Andrew Jarecki's material. Included in that are going to be the parts of Mr. Durst's statements, both in the DVD commentary and in the 3 days of interviews that followed in 2010 and the 1 day in 2012.
Got it.
So that's what we'll be doing. And we wanted
Consistent
to,
with the STIP.
yes, and we wanted to break it up so that they would see the movie in and of itself, and then we wouldn't immediately go into what's going to be some repetition, but not a lot.
When will you have, when are you planning, you intend to play your interview with Mr. Durst?
Oh, so I'm going off the top of my head, Your Honor. So my memory right now as I sit here is the following witnesses. It's going to be, today we have Tom Bevel. Then we play All Good Things. Then we end up doing conditional examinations of Julie Smith and Lisa DePaula. On Monday, we would end up doing the material with Jarecki and Smerling, which will include all of the interviews and the commentary we just discussed.
It may go a day and a half.
Yeah, and that's going to take some time. After that, again, off the tip of my head, without having it open, I believe next is going to be Nick Chavin. One moment. Okay. Then we have Nick Chavin. We have his wife, Terry Chavin. And then we get into the Louisiana part of the case. And that's going to be Special Agent Williams, which we might have, I believe. Do we have the stipulation?
We're working on it still.
Yeah, we're very close to stipulation on that. And then it's going to be the interview. And I think, Your Honor, and again, that's off the top of my head, but I think that's a pretty accurate, I think, synopsis. And it's our belief in talking about it, you have to kind of space it out. I think we will be done with our case by the end of next week. Do you agree, Mr. Bailey?
I think if everything goes on track, I think.
I want you to know that I have been working on jury instructions, and I want you to get me any proposed instructions on one of our dark days. I'd like to have it, I need to have it ready, so as soon as the defense rests, and you do, if you have any, after any rebuttal, I would instruct immediately. I don't like to spend time at the end assessing everything. I want to have everything ready. If there's issues come up during the last day or two, then we amend the instructions we have. But the bulk of them are completed before the evidence is completed. So we do have a dark day, August 10. That might be a day where I'd finalize it. We also have a late start on Monday, August 2. So that might be some time, 10 a.m.
August 10 would be a good idea, Your Honor.
Well, 10 would be to finalize it. So we might need to have some preliminary talking before then, but certainly the 10th.
And August 2nd is I didn't have that.
That's just a 10 a.m.
Oh, no, I do
start.
have that.
It's a
Yeah.
slightly
Okay.
late start.
Got it.
And then you were going to tell me today what time you would finish tomorrow.
Oh, so,
It depends how,
it depends on Tom Bevel, Your Honor, so we'll know by the end of today,
Okay.
where we are. I mean, I think the
I think
defense,
at the lunch break we'll have a good idea.
the defense had requested that we finish by noon tomorrow, and given the stipulation that we reached, we have no opposition to accommodating their request. We're certainly, if they want to, we would love to use the whole day, but we understand. And I don't think we're gonna be in the position, I can tell the court for sure, we can use right up until noon if the court wants, because we have conditional examinations to be played.
All right. Are we going to, you say you have Tom Bevel. He's here to testify
Yes.
live?
Yeah.
So this transcript, we're halfway through it. We're going to finish it?
Yeah.
Or-
Yes.
It's not very much more. We ought to, in this, for the sake of
Yes.
continuity.
We are. We're gonna finish it. We don't wanna interrupt. That was their witness, so we're gonna finish it. We'll do Tom Bevel. And, but we're moving along, Your Honor.
Good.
Okay, let's move then.
All right. Shall we take a recess and a formal opening for the jurors?
Yeah.
Thank you. People versus Robert Durst. Mr. Durst is present with Mr. DeGuerin, Mr. Chesnoff. Mr. Lewis is here also. At the council table, we have Mr. Milius, Mr. Balian, Mr. Henderson, and Mr. Lewin are present. Also, we have at least one of our readers, volunteer readers. We're grateful for them returning. Our jurors and alternates all are present, they've returned, and what a mess that was on the 405, wasn't it? For those of you who, probably most of you encountered it. So just a reminder, please drive carefully, drive defensively. I don't know what's up with drivers these days, but I sure would hate to see any of you get in a fender bender. It's very frustrating. It's hard enough trying to do a jury trial, be a juror, and it's a stressful time. You might be, it's important to be mindful, especially when you're driving. So, all right, but thank you. And you folks too. It's crazy out there.
I'm the designated driver, Your Honor.
Excellent, Mr. Chesnoff. I would trust you. All right, do we have a volunteer this morning to read the part of Max Courtney? We're going to finish off. There's just a little bit left of that transcript of Max Courtney, who testified at Galveston for the defense. What's your name, sir?
Great.
Well, welcome. Thank you for reading this. And you tell me your name again. Okay. Well, welcome back. Did you get that? Say that one again.
Ruel, R-E-U-E-L. Last name Ong, O-N-G.
Oh, we saw you yesterday. Yes, thank you. Welcome back. All right. So we left off at the beginning of the cross-examination by the Assistant District Attorney Bennett. And Mr. Henderson, you are the designated judge in this transcript, so why don't you start this off?
Line 14, the court, all right?
May I proceed, Your Honor?
The court, yes, sir.
Mr. Courtney, how are you doing?
Fine, sir.
We met when you came down and looked at the mall, didn't we?
Yes, sir.
If you have any question about what I'm trying to ask you, ask me to rephrase it, all right?
All right, sir.
The examination you did, that didn't you tell anything about the date or time in which this bullet hole, as you call it, was fired?
No.
It doesn't tell you who shot the gun, does it?
No, sir.
And do you know the defendant is 5'7"?
It wouldn't surprise me if that were a case. I would say that would being the size he looks to be, yes, sir.
And nothing about your examination told you what or who or what was shot at other than it had hit the wall.
Correct.
It doesn't tell you about who repaired the hole, does it?
No, sir.
It doesn't tell you when the hole was repaired, does it?
Well, probably after October the 2nd, it looks like if what I see in States 364 or 365 is accurate. But again, I have already said I am not sure that's what that is, what it looks like. So other than that, no, sir.
It was repaired after October the 2nd?
Well, if that's what that is in that photograph taken by the police department, it would have been after, I would think.
And you took a measurement of the apartment?
Yes, sir.
It's not a very large apartment, is it?
No, sir.
You could walk from one side of the apartment to the kitchen area in a matter of just a couple of seconds, couldn't you?
Yes, sir.
And the trajectory doesn't tell you a person was all the way back at the window, does it?
No, sir.
It could have been up to very close to the mall, could it?
Well, I would think if it were real close, you would see some peppering from the gunpowder, which I don't see, but probably certainly from the muzzle, maybe 12 inches back or farther away. I don't think it would pepper the wood or the paint.
Even though it had been freshly painted, you would still see the peppering?
If it were real close, yes, sir, I think.
Real close would be,
6 inches maybe, 4 inches.
and you have already testified in your opinion, it was freshly painted.
Well, I think my testimony was it had that appearance of being freshly painted.
That's fair enough. And so as long as it was farther than about 6 inches away from the wall, anywhere along this continuum would be fine.
Yes, sir.
Nothing about this inconsistent with a 5'7" man shooting at another 5'7" man.
No, sir.
Nothing about this tells you that 2 shots were not fired in this apartment on September 28 of 2001.
No, sir.
And as far as your diagram in Defendant's 82, these are the notes that you made after measuring the wall. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And the measurements, they don't tell you exactly to a precise point where the source of the blood was, does it?
No, sir.
It would give you a general area,
Yes, sir.
and that area would be up to, 18 inches to 2 feet up from the wall inwards.
Yes, sir. I would say so.
And there's also a variance from left to right as you are looking at the wall.
Sure.
And there's nothing about the spatter itself that tells you, assuming that the source of the blood came from the head, okay?
Okay.
There's nothing about the pattern that tells you which direction the body was laying at the time of the shooting.
No, sir.
It doesn't tell you anything about whether the person was on their back or on their front or on their sides.
No, sir.
You are familiar with the term blowback.
Yes, sir.
Blowback is the blood that gets blown back into the barrel of a gun on a close shooting.
Well, blowback is blood that gets blown backwards. It sometimes does get blown back into the muzzle. Yes, sir.
Get blown back onto the gun, correct?
Sometimes.
And that happens if the gun is within about 12 inches or less or 6 inches off the target.
It certainly can.
You are likely to find blowback on the gun, aren't you?
You may find it. Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. No further question.
You may take a seat in the front row, sir.
Let me go over a couple of things with you right quick, Mr. Courtney. State's Exhibit 354, is it?
I think it's 345, maybe.
345? You wouldn't expect police officers to have missed a bullet hole if there was still a hole in there, would you, if they had looked through there?
Well, no, sir, I wouldn't.
Well, you mentioned that you thought that the repair must have been done after October the 2nd. Now, let's assume that the repair was before October the 2nd, but not repainted. The apartment hadn't been repainted yet. Would that be consistent with what 345 shows?
If that's just a shadow there, then perhaps it is maybe just such a depression that is forming a shadow. That's a possibility.
Mr. Bennett asked you if what you found tells you the date the bullet made the hole, who shot the bullet, or who repaired it. You can't say, can you?
No, sir.
But what you can say is that it is a bullet hole. It was shot by someone, and someone repaired it.
Yes, sir.
Now, blowback. The state asked you about blowback, and I think your answer was you may find blowback. What are the things that dictate whether you find blowback on a gun, that is, blood that comes back from the person that's been shot with a gun?
When you have the back spatter because you don't always have it, how far away the gun is, what might be blocking the gun, that is, and all over the gun, all sorts of things which control whether or not you are actually going to get the back spatter onto the gun itself. And of course, the possibility is that it gets on there and it's removed also.
And even under the most ideal conditions, do you always get back spatter, what is called blowback on a gun?
No, sir.
Well, you tell us.
It's possible. It happens in a lot of cases. It doesn't happen in a lot of cases. I can't give the statistics right now. I don't know that any have ever been published on a large-scale study, which would be necessary to talk about probability anyway. It might happen and it might not happen.
Thank you. Pass the witness.
A couple of follow-up questions, Your Honor. You said that one of the things it would happen, you said that one of the things it would depend on is how far the gun is from the source of the blood, correct?
Yes, sir.
In a hypothetical case, if someone was standing over the source of the blood on the floor, that would be consistent with the blood spatter you found, correct?
Yes, sir.
And nothing about the blood spatters tells you how far the gun was from the source of the blood.
No, sir.
And the gun could have come from many directions towards the source of the blood as long as it stayed within the same general area that you and Mr. Bevel had agreed to.
Yes, sir. There's a great deal of movement of gun and head that can take place and still make that possibility.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Nothing further.
All right, sir. That's it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your reading. Now, there were exhibits. Have you agreed upon those?
Yes, Your Honor. As a matter of bookkeeping, we'd like to mark the transcript of Max Courtney as next in order for the court.
That's court's
14.
exhibit number 14.
Thank you, Your Honor. And then, well, this is a defense witness, again, for bookkeeping purposes, we're going to mark the exhibits from the witness as a people's exhibit. So as we've been doing, next in order, People's 254.
Do you want to do it, does that matter to the, did you agree on that also?
We did.
Okay.
So People's 254 is a 3-page exhibit sheet. This correlates the exhibits read through the transcript with our new exhibits for trial. People's 254A is a photograph, which was defense 65. People's 254B is a photograph, which was defense 66. People's 254C is a photograph, which was defense 67, and that's been substituted as stipulated earlier. People's 254D is a photograph that was defense 68, again substituted as stipulated earlier. People's 69 is a photograph which was, strike that. People's 254E is a photograph which was defense 69. People's 254F is a photograph which was defense 70. People's 254G is a photograph which was defense 71. People's 254H is a photograph which was defense 72. People's 254I is a photograph which was defense 73. People's 254J is a photograph which was defense 74. People's 254K is a photograph which was defense 75. People's 254L is a photograph, which was defense 76. People's 254M is a photograph, which was defense 77. People's 254N is a photograph, which was defense 78. People's 254O is a photograph, which was defense 79. People's 254P is a photograph, which was defense 80. People's 254Q is a photograph, which was defense 81. People's 254R is a one-page diagram and notes. That was defense 82. And finally, People's 254S is a photograph marked in the Galveston transcript as states 345.
All right, thank you for that. And now back to the people's case. People may call their next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Before we call our next witness, we actually have a stipulation. It may be marked as People's 255, and it is stipulation, 68.
Thank you.
3. Stipulation 68 reads as follows. Texas DPS Austin Laboratory criminalists Maurice Padilla and Deborah Furman performed DNA analysis of the Ruger 22 caliber model 22/24 semi-automatic handgun bearing serial number 223-51668, which is People's Exhibit 163 in this case. No detectable bloodstains were found on this firearm. Additionally, Texas DPS Austin Laboratory criminalists Maurice Padilla and Deborah Furman performed DNA analysis of the 22 caliber shell case, which was recovered by Sergeant Gary Jones from the trash container found in the rear alley of 2213 Avenue K in Galveston, Texas, and depicted in People's Exhibit 184, page 64. No apparent bloodstains were detected on the shell case. So stipulated?
Stipulated.
And that would be People's 255.
The court has accepted that stipulation. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. The people now call Tom Bevel. Keep it on.
Raise your right hand and sworn. Do you solemnly state that the testimony you may give in the cause now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you, sir. Please be seated. Please state and spell your first and last name.
Tom Bevel, T-O-M. Bevel is B, like in boy, E, Victor, E-L.
Thank you.
You may proceed, Mr. Milius.
Thank you, Your Honor. What do you do for a living? What do you do for a living?
I'm sorry. I'm the president of Bevel, Gardner and Associates, which is a forensic education and a consulting company. Board certified as a crime scene reconstructionist, doing case analysis and then also teaching forensic science courses.
You mentioned crime scene reconstruction. What is crime scene reconstruction?
Yes, sir. There are a number of forensic disciplines that can certainly be considered in trying to do an analysis of a case. The majority of those I would not be an expert in, but I should have the ability to take, for example, the medical examiner's pathology report and understand what is being said relative to the wounds. And in actuality, what you're doing is pulling all of the pieces together from the various experts, applying the scientific method to identify the best explanation of the viable ways that something could have occurred.
What's your background, training, and experience with regard to crime scene reconstruction?
I have 3 basic courses in bloodstain pattern analysis, 2 in shooting incident reconstruction, 2 advanced courses in bloodstain pattern analysis.
Mr. Bevel, can you stop 1 second? There's a microphone in front of you. Yeah, it seems to be it's a little low. Could you pull the microphone a little closer to you? It's the...
Okay, and is it, which one?
I think it's a little... Yeah, the less tech-looking one.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah. Can I
Yours
inquire?
are nodding, it's better. And the mask obviously inhibits us a little bit, so you have to talk a little louder and closer to the microphone.
Maybe the angle of the mouthpiece, right?
Yeah, you can tip that up if you want, more towards you.
Hopefully that's better.
Sounds better.
We were talking, well, I'm sorry, but repeat the question now.
That's okay. I was asking you about your background, training, education with regard to crime scene reconstruction.
Yes. To become board certified, you have to first apply to the International Association for Identification, and they study some of your past reports, your ethics. Ultimately, if you are accepted, there is a 4-hour test that is divided into 3 sections. One is bloodstain pattern analysis questions. Another one is shooting incident reconstruction questions. And the third is homicide investigation and wound dynamics. If you pass that, then you're giving a number of practicals to study, write an analysis, and then that goes in front of a board, and then you have an opportunity to defend your opinions with any questions that they may be asking. And then, without going into all of the classes that I've gone to, there is one that I consider to be one of the better ones over the years. My department sent me to Hendon Police College in London, England, where for 6 weeks studied forensic science. And at the end of that, I had a 2-week stint, 80 hours, with London Medical College, in essence, watching as well as participating in autopsies. And then also had a 2-week, 80-hour lab liaison attachment with the Metropolitan Police Department in London, or their lab.
You lecture on the subject?
Yes.
And where do you lecture?
A number of different places. In bloodstain pattern analysis, I've done over 130 40-hour courses, and that would be the basic. And then in advanced bloodstain, I've done approximately 30 plus. Crime scene reconstruction, which is 40 hours in duration for the basic, I've done, I would estimate, probably about 35, and then advanced courses in that about 14 or 15.
When you lecture on the subject of crime scene reconstruction, who are the students?
They are usually, the majority, investigators with some law enforcement agency. But I've also had prosecutors, defense attorneys, medical examiners, but that would encompass the majority.
Have you published any articles on crime scene reconstruction?
On Reconstruction, I have a number of peer-reviewed articles, as well as one first edition textbook on practical crime scene analysis.
Who reads what field is the textbook designed for? Who reads it? What type of people?
The courses are designed for anybody that's doing investigations. As I stated previously, the students would encompass either medical examiner investigators, but primarily law enforcement, occasionally investigated for insurance companies.
Have you qualified as an expert in and testified in state and federal court?
I have, yes, sir.
When you are retained, are you retained by who? What parties retain you typically?
It would depend on what year that you looked at. Whenever I retired from the Oklahoma City Police Department, it was primarily prosecutors. Over the years, it's become pretty close to 50-50 from prosecution to defense. And then there are other groups that may hire me, such as an insurance company, occasionally a medical examiner or pathologist, occasionally a family.
Do the cases that you work on necessarily go to trial?
No, not necessarily.
So some of them reach a disposition before they go to trial?
Yes. One would be here in Los Angeles County, which would be the Mrs. Goodman case.
I'm going to stop you there. I'll maybe follow
Okay.
up on that later. Generally speaking, from the perspective of a crime scene reconstructionist, what happens when an individual shoots a gun at another person, hitting them in the head? What type of evidence are you basically getting, and what is the process as that happens?
With a bullet entering some portion of the body, such as a head, the impact of the bullet can create what is referred to as backspatter, and that would be blood coming back in the direction from where the bullet is coming from. If there is an exit wound, obviously on the opposing side, if it were a head, you would have forward spatter. And because forward spatter is going in the same direction as the force, which would be the bullet, it tends to be much greater in volume than what the backspatter is.
So just to go over that very briefly, you're talking a bullet enters a person's head, and in the direction from which the bullet came, blood would be shot back, and that would be called backspatter?
Yes, sir, with one qualification in the way you stated it. Certainly the blood can come back in somewhat of a cone shape if the bullet is going directly in. But if the bullet is coming from an angle, the blood tends to go out at a 90 degree to the surface. So you could have a bullet coming into the side here, but the blood would actually be going straight out from the surface.
Now, this blood that comes out of the wound, whether it's forward or back spatter, if it hits a subject, hits a surface, do you have a name for that?
I didn't understand that, I'm sorry.
If the blood itself, what do you call that, coming out of a wound?
Well, with an entry, it would be backspatter. In a controlled lab setting, you can create a perfect cone shape with the blood coming out. Of course, with a actual shooting, that's not a controlled environment such as a lab, and you can have a cone shape. It can certainly be abnormal in the shape that it ends up taking. And then upon the exit, the same thing. We can have a cone shape pattern, again, maybe abnormal because of hair, skin, tissue. There's a number of different factors.
So when you go to a crime scene, or a crime scene photos are showed to you, and obviously the crime has already happened, so you can't see the actual spatter as it happens, what are you looking for?
Are you saying you can't see?
Yeah, you're not present for the crime,
Okay.
obviously, right? So you go into a crime has already happened, you look at the particular scene. What are you looking for?
You're looking for any direction that would be from physical evidence. It always has to be germane to the individual crime scene. In a stabbing, you may be looking for either spatter or cast off from a knife being welded. In a bludgeoning, you'd be looking for impact spatter, which can assist in identifying where the impacts were actually created. In a shooting, the stains tend to become much, much smaller than what they would be from, example, an impact. You're looking for the size, shape, distribution, direction of travel, and at the patterns in a holistic view.
Essentially, are you looking at any surface in the crime scene, walls, floors, for evidence of spatter?
Yes, you are, which would include, if possible, any items that were present that may be, for example, clothing, a weapon, anything that may have been removed.
If you saw spatter, could you be able to, by looking at spatter, determine the direction of travel the spatter went through to hit a surface?
If you have a elongated stain, yes, you are. If it has what is called a leading edge, which is rounded on one side, and maybe an example, if I have blood coming off of my finger, it will become spherical in shape very, very quickly upon separation. If it hits the podium, we have the friction from touching the podium, but inertia, wanting the blood to continue going in the same direction of travel. So the leading edge is somewhat rounded, the opposing forms a point. So to figure out where that blood stain came from, we'd run a line down the long axis of the blood stain. If it's a well-formed blood stain, we would be able to identify the width and length and ratio, and then identify a angle, and we would run, in essence, a string backwards. Somewhere along that string, this would have occurred. So direction of travel is, if you have blood stains pointing in the direction of travel, it's in the opposite direction that it came from.
Your Honor, I have a exhibit. I'd like to mark it as People's 256. And
Yes.
Mr. Bevel, I'd like to show you something. You provided this to me. Walk us through what this example is.
Yes, this is a high-speed photography done by Iowa State University. One of the people mentioned that you can see is Dr. Michael Taylor, who I conferred with relative to doing some of these. And this, in essence, is a blood droplet that is coming from above onto a angled, somewhat angled surface. And it is showing us the leading edge, the direction of travel, and how it forms a point through this high-speed photography.
And if we can play it.
Well, I'm not sure how up
No,
here. There we go.
Yeah. And if you could describe briefly again, so what you're looking at. So if you came to a crime scene, saw something like this, what is it going to show you?
We would look at the rounded edge at the very top, and that would be where the spherical blood droplet first contacted this sheet of paper. Inertia is wanting it to continue traveling in the direction that it is going. It's losing blood as it travels down, and as it loses more and more and more blood, it forms a point. So looking at this at a crime scene, assuming this is somewhat of a a vertical surface such as a wall, we would know that it came very close to the surface and from above going down.
So from using a spatter and looking at the shapes of the spatter, are you able to determine where the source of the blood was?
In this instance, without measuring the width and the length to identify an angle, we would simply say it's very close to the wall and from above going down.
Are you familiar with the term void pattern?
Yes, sir.
What is a void pattern?
A void pattern is blood stains that are continuous with an interruption and then continuous typically on the other side. An example of that, if I had my hand up on the wall and I had a can of spray paint and I painted my hand and then moved my hand, you would see the outline of the hand that was there previously. That would be a void.
And what essentially, when you see a void pattern, what is that telling you?
That there was something that was interfering or blocking whatever whether it was blood, whether it was paint, whatever the liquid was.
So in general, from analyzing the blood spatter, can you determine the position of the head relative or source of blood relative to the surrounding circumstance, the surrounding environment?
Yes, sir. You are able to identify a general area.
What did you testify in the 2003 Galveston trial for Mr. Robert Durst?
I did.
And what did you examine in preparation for that trial?
What was sent to me was the wall board and the baseboard and the frame, right frame of the doorway that had bloodstain patterns on it, and then this was sent by Detective Sergeant Gary Jones, and he also included a rough diagram of the area that this would have come from.
I'm going to show you a few things and to clarify exactly what you got. Showing you what's been previously marked as People's 184, page 137. You recognize that?
Yes, sir.
What is that?
This is you can see the plywood in the background and a hinge where the plywood was coming over the wall board and a portion of the door frame and baseboard. And this was the items that were sent to me in Oklahoma City to study the patterns that were there, to measure them, and the actual question that was being asked originally was just simply, what is the mechanism that would be consistent with creating these blood spatters? And in my opinion, back then, we used the terminology low, medium, and high velocity. High velocity associated with gunshots, high-speed machinery, or expectorate out of the mouth. And that was really the only question, was what was this consistent with?
Okay, so you were provided basically a paneling from the kitchen of the crime scene and asked to determine what caused this blood stains.
That's correct.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as People's 184, page 138. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
And what is that?
That is the side door frame, baseboard, wall board that I received, and I circled each one of the suspected blood stains, numbered them, and then measured each one.
And is that just basically a closer-up version of what we saw in People's 184, page 137?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm going to show you as well People's 184, page 139. Do you recognize that?
Yes, sir. That's a closer magnified.
And as you testified just previously, you see the handwriting, circles, and numbers that you put on there?
I did do those, yes, sir.
And also the measuring devices?
Yes, sir.
In addition, you testified that you received a diagram. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, may I mark as People's 257 a crime scene diagram? It's for counsel. It's LADA 066121 to 066130. It's a 10-page document. And we could, sorry, 066121 through 066130. And Mr. Balian has a copy of it in front of you. I'm going to project the first page of it. Do you recognize that?
Yes, sir.
And is that the diagram that you were provided?
Yes, sir. And just simply to be honest, in my mind, I thought that it was a hand-drawn one. But it would have been similar to this if it was not this one. It was a long time ago.
Yeah. This document you actually provided to me yesterday, is that correct?
That I did.
And that's the document you identified as the one that was provided to you?
And I believe that is accurate. In my mind, I remember it being in ink or pencil.
But of the sum total of what you received in preparation for your testimony or your participation in the trial in Galveston in 2003 is the paneling from the kitchen with the actual panel and then the framing around it, and just this pack of 10 pages, which it includes a diagram. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And that is the only items that you received. Is that correct?
Well, again, prior to my testimony at court that morning, I saw a number of crime scene photographs. But in rendering my opinions to what was there, this was all I had.
Right. So basically, you walk into court that morning prepared to testify, and you're provided by the prosecution additional crime scene photographs to give context to the area?
Yes, sir, and they had some additional questions.
Okay. But prior to that, you received no other information or any documentation about the actual crime scene? Just what we've talked about so far?
That's correct.
And then later that day, you actually testified, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. In your field, is it standard within your field of expertise to review any recreations or animations created by the defense regarding their version of how an incident took place?
Yes, sir.
And why is that?
It is a demonstrative that is being used to try and assist the explanation of the events or actions that took place. You would compare that against the physical evidence to either concur with what's being said or state that you can't tell or that it's inaccurate and explain why.
For your work on the 2003 Galveston trial, did you review the defense animation before testifying?
No, sir.
When you actually later that day went and testified, did you even know that a defense animation had been created?
No, sir.
Did you eventually obtain the defense animation?
In 2016, to the best of my recollection, was the first time that I saw it.
And who provided it to you?
I believe it was the county or district attorney's office here.
Would have that been, do you remember who specifically gave it to you?
Well, it was from Attorney John Lewin.
Okay. Also within your field, is it standard within your field of expertise to review statements of witnesses or the defendant regarding their version of how an incident took place?
Yes, sir, it is.
Why?
Again, you're doing the same thing based upon any analysis of the physical evidence that tells a story. You can also have a verbal story. And if you take the verbal story and statements, overlay it kind of like a lattice over the physical evidence, there should be areas that either agree with that statement or are in disagreement, or in some instances, you get to an area where you simply can't tell.
And for your work on the 2003 Galveston trial, did you review the testimony of the defendant before you testified?
No, sir.
Did you, in fact, testify before the defendant testified in that case?
Yes, sir.
And subsequent to your testifying, defendant testified, did you watch the defendant testifying?
No, sir.
Did you review any testimony that the defendant had based upon his testifying?
No, sir.
And were you at all called later in the trial to address anything that the defendant said during the 2003 trial?
No, sir.
Eventually, were you provided with the testimony of the defendant from the 2003 Galveston trial?
Yes, sir.
Approximately when were you provided that?
Approximately 2016.
And who provided you the testimony?
Again, Attorney John Lewin.
Is it standard within your field of expertise to review expert reports or statements from experts, or to review testimony of experts regarding how an incident took place?
It is a common practice.
Why?
Once again, the physical evidence always tells one story, and verbal statements can either agree with the physical evidence or disagree, or again, you can't tell. But the whole idea is to identify what can be substantiated, what cannot be substantiated relative to the verbal compared to the physical.
For your work on the 2003 Galveston trial, did you review any expert reports, expert statements, expert testimony before you testified?
No, sir.
Did you subsequently learn that an expert created a report and also testified at the 2003 Galveston trial?
Sometime frame later, yes, sir.
Okay. And obviously, you didn't have the opportunity to watch that expert testify based upon what you just said.
I did not.
And you were not called later in trial to testify about whether you concurred or disagreed with that expert.
I was not called back, no.
Did you subsequently learn who the expert was?
Yes, Max Courtney.
And do you know Max Courtney?
Yes, knew him rather well. In fact, he was a student of a basic 40-hour bloodstain course.
So he was a student of yours?
Yes.
Did you eventually acquire the testimony of Max Courtney from the Galveston trial in 2003?
Yes, sir, I did.
And when did you obtain that?
Again, approximately 2016.
And who provided you with that testimony?
Attorney John Lewin.
Okay, I want to go briefly into talk to you about the crime scene in Galveston in 2001. I would like to show you exhibit what's previously been marked as People's 184, page 136. Now, did you have the opportunity to subsequently, you testified that upon arriving to testify in 2003, you were provided other crime scene photos. Is this one of them?
It would be.
And were you also provided this picture subsequently when our office got involved?
Yes, sir.
What is this photograph?
This is showing the, pardon me, the area of the wallboard cutout, baseboard, and door frame.
So is this essentially the missing part, the panel that was provided for you to do analysis?
Correct.
Okay, I'd like to show you People's 184, page 137. $137.
I was doing so good.
He was doing wonderful. He really, better than my expectations. Actually, let's put that up again, sorry.
Which one?
The one that, 137. It was my error, that is 137. Actually, let's advance to 138. Okay, Just so we're on the same page, do you have a description? There's obviously the wall wasn't like this exactly when it was in its place. It was all together. Do you have a definitions of what you're describing in terms of what you see here, just in terms of what the structure is?
Relative to the structure,
So you've described this previously. There's a wall board, there's framing board, and there's a wood base board. So that just so we're on the same page.
yes, sir.
Okay, so can you describe what each section is?
What was sent, as we see in the container that it was sent, was a wall board that had blood stains on the wall board, on the side door frame, and the baseboard. And what it is creating is a pattern that certainly not perfectly cone-shaped, but it is consistent with blood that has been in air that has subsequently landed on the surfaces.
Okay, so in the middle, the bigger area, what would you describe that? The basic square, the white square, is that the wall board?
That's the wall board.
And there's a vertical piece to my left. What would you describe that as?
As the door frame.
And then below the square is a horizontal piece. What is that?
That would be the baseboard, joining the floor and going upward.
Okay, for your preparation in testifying today, did you look at additional items?
When?
In general, just for preparing for testifying today?
For today, yes,
Yes.
I have.
And what did you examine for your preparation in testifying today?
Additional scene photographs, the trial transcript from Max Courtney and his testimony, the trial transcript from Mr. Durst and his testimony, my testimony, all that I recall relative to this preparation.
Did you also examine a defense animation?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I did. Originally, what I had for my report was, I wouldn't say redacted, but a shorter version, I guess, of a complete animation. What I had was blurry, not identifiable completely in certain places. Later, I received a unedited, complete video that was much better in quality, and you could see much better.
I want to walk you through the crime scene. Let's put up People's Exhibit 184, page 110. And just to give us a little context, what is this?
This is a photograph looking at the table and chair that would be to the right of where the doorway leading into the kitchen is.
Sorry, this is People's 109. You want 110?
Sorry, I apologize, 109. Since we're on 109, can we move to the next in order? I believe it's 110.
Page 110 of that same exhibit?
Yes. Do you recognize this?
Yes, this is more of a overview where we can see the table, the chair, and then going to the left, we're able to see the doorway leading into the kitchen area, and to the left of the left door frame is a bed.
And I believe we have one more, page 111. No, 111. That's 111. No. Let's put up 110 again. I'm sorry, Aviva. From your understanding of looking at the crime scene, the paneling that you reviewed was on, where was that relative to this picture?
If you went through the doorway into the kitchen, it would be to the left as entering the kitchen.
So on the opposite wall, opposite side of the wall of this picture where the bed is?
Yes, the opposite wall of where the bed is up against.
No, it's fine. Based upon your examination, did you come to conclusions about the crime scene and how it happened?
Yes, sir. Best explanation.
Okay. Did you come to any conclusions about the relationship to the source of blood and the wall, and as to whether or not there was anything between the source of blood, the head, and the wall?
Yes, there's
what-
no evidence of anything intervening between the blood source and the wall.
And did you come to a conclusion about how far away the head was from the wall?
Yes, sir.
And what was that opinion?
Approximately 18 inches or less.
And did you come to a conclusion, I think you testified to it earlier, as to what caused the spatter that you saw?
Yes, that it was consistent with the size distribution from a gunshot wound, which in this case would be back spatter.
And did you come to a conclusion as to how high off the ground the head was?
It is either on the floor or slightly above.
And did you come to a conclusion as to the position of the head relative to the blood stains?
The blood source, if it is coming from the head, we can identify the general area. Can't state from that what the position of the head would be, face down, face up, going to the left or right. Couldn't say that.
But could you tell essentially how far away it was relative, instead of position in terms of the nose, like face up to side, but rather if you think of the head as like a basic sphere, where that sphere was in relationship to the spatter?
Yes, sir.
And what was that?
That it is to the right of the edge of the door frame, going back, that would be in line with the only two elongated stains that we have, one which was number 2, the other one which was number 9. The upper one is going upward.
Mr. Bevel, I'm going to stop you a second. We'll get, I'll show you the
Okay.
exhibits and we'll go through it. Let me draw your attention to, let's put up People's 184, 138, page 138. I'm only doing this to see if I can confuse Mr. Bayland. He's on fire. When you look at this, the blood spatter, walk us through what you see in terms of a pattern.
Yes, sir. The highest stain up from the floor is approximately, pardon me, 19 inches, which would be stain number 2. And then going from the edge of the
Let me stop you a second,
Yes.
Mr. Bevel. I think Mr. Henderson has a pointer somewhere around that area that maybe we can use to point out the various stains.
okay, and
And there's actually an image being projected behind.
using this one?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Number 2 stain is the highest up from the floor. So that would be the highest distance in our pattern going vertically. Going horizontal, we have stains that are right to the edge, but none on the inside of the door frame. And it is going over to approximately number 1, and that would be approximately 32 inches. And we're looking at the overall pattern and any stains that we can identify directionality to.
What does this pattern tell you about the anything relationship, whether or not there was something in between the source of the blood and what type of spatter caused this?
Okay. The type of spatter, given the sizes and distribution, is certainly consistent with a gunshot occurrence. In this case, it would be back spatter, blood coming from the entrance going back in the opposing direction. And in looking at the pattern, looking at the width and the height, we're looking for any distinctive cone shape and any individual stains that are elongated and any possible direction of travel. With that, we're able to identify a general area as to where the blood source was whenever a bullet entered, creating this back spatter.
Now, we talked about, generally speaking, at the beginning of your testimony about a void pattern. Do you see any evidence of a void pattern in this photograph?
I do not see what I could identify as a void pattern, no, sir.
And if there were a void pattern, what would you, like, could you describe for us what you would be seeing in this pattern?
You would be looking for stains on either, it could be to the side or above or below, but stains that has an interruption with a continuous pattern on the other side, whether it's above, to the side, or below. But it would be showing you that something was there that's been removed, because that pattern would be complete if it was all there originally. Again, I don't see anything within this that helps me to identify that something was intervening.
In your experience, if there had been, for example, a body between the head, the source of the blood, and the wall, would there be a void pattern?
If there's just simply a head and we have a shot into the head and there's nothing in between the wall and the head, we would not have a void pattern. If there's nothing intervening, we would if there was something intervening.
And that something could be a body, an arm, anything that could be blocking the travel of blood. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And that you would see reflected in the pattern?
It should be, yes.
And in this case, you see no evidence, you testified that there's no evidence of a void pattern.
That I can identify as a void, I cannot.
Approximately how many stains did you note on the board? Or in the exhibit?
The total number, I believe, was actually 23. There was a stain that I was not comfortable that I could call it a blood stain, so approximately 22.
You mentioned earlier that the size of the blood spatter was consistent with being produced by a gunshot. And I believe, counsel, you would stipulate that, we talked about this earlier, or having an oral stipulation about that this blood spatter was in fact caused by gunshot to the head.
Yes,
Counsel,
sir.
so stipulate?
Oh, sorry.
I want to talk to you about the direction and location of the source of blood. Can you tell us where the source of the blood was that created that bloodstain spatter pattern?
Yes, I can identify a general area. Yes, sir.
And where was it?
If we draw a line down the long axis of the two stains, one that is going upward and the other one, I can't tell whether it's going up or down, but it is elongated. If we draw a line down through the long axis of those, that should identify an area that would be consistent with a blood stain traveling upward. For example, if it was traveling upward and to the right, our long line through the axis would come back to the left. If it's traveling to the left, a long line would show us that it's coming from the right going to the left. But stain number 2 and number 9 are basically vertical, straight up from the floor, and those would be the best explanation as to where the source would be. So taking a line through the long axis coming straight down to the floor would be an area that would be consistent with where the blood source was.
Okay, do you see 2 and 9 on the exhibit in front of you?
Yes, should I point to it?
Yes, please.
Number 2, which is rising upward, is here. Number 9, which is elongated, but it doesn't have a point showing upward travel or downward travel.
So, in your opinion, the source of blood would be directly 90 degrees from that, so directly outward from that?
Toward, obviously, the floor, yes.
Okay. Your Honor, this would be a good time to break.
Ladies and gentlemen, do not converse among yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with this case. Do not form or express any opinion on the case. We'll be back at 10:50, 15-minute break. Address during the break?
We're going to discuss whether we want to bring something at sidebar or on the record right now, but right now we don't have anything for you.
One quick follow-up. Mr. Lewin described an intention this morning regarding the defendant's testimony or failure to testify or choosing not to testify, and it occurred to me that there's a fine line between pointing out that there was a claim the defendant would testify and did not, if that comes to pass, for the purpose of having a jury disregard the opening. That's different from commenting upon not testifying from a Fifth Amendment perspective. So I think it's a fine line that you need to check the cases to be sure that any such argument would not cross that line. That's all. Thank you. Recess.